Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for September 25th, 2023. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
I would love to. Mrs. Acosta.
Here.
Mrs. Bradford.
Here.
Mrs. Burton.
Here.
Mrs. Frank.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mrs. Bonnefield is here. President Johnson.
Here, we do have a quorum.
Thank you.
That'll take us to item 2, our pledge. And Mrs. Jarvis, would you help lead us in the pledge?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome to those in the audience. If you'd like to follow along with our agenda tonight, if you go out the left door and turn to the right, you'll find a table that has both the agendas and blue slips for anyone who wants to address the board during audience communication. This is our regular meeting, or what we call a voting meeting. Many of the items, or most all of the items that are coming before the board tonight, have already been brought to the board on at least 2 occasions, one in our study session and once in our Committee of the Whole meeting, which was last week. The Committee of the Whole meeting is really the one that you want to tune into to see the in-depth discussion and questions on the items that are being brought before the board. Many times we don't all agree on items that are being brought or how they're being brought, but at that meeting we work out our differences so we can reach a consensus. That's one of the reasons why you won't hear a lot of discussion on the items tonight. If you really want to see those discussions, tune into our Committee of the Whole. Before we begin, I also want to note that we have a new member sitting at the board table tonight. This is Teresa Junta. And as we know, our beloved Jill Wozniak is retiring. This is her last meeting. Her official retirement is Friday, I believe. So again, we had a lot of discussion on this a few weeks ago, but again, Jill, we want to take this opportunity to thank you for everything you've done for the district and for the board, and we look forward to seeing Teresa come in and learn the position. It's big shoes to fill, but again, thank you so much, Jill, for everything you have done. With that, we will move to our communications, which is item 3, and item A is district update from the superintendent. And I will turn it over to Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate it, President Johnson. I will tell you, this one is a little lengthy, but it highlights our amazing kiddos and our staff, so I think you will enjoy it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. On your screen tonight, we have lots of examples of learning and growing starting across the district. As you know, we have our STEM pathway that now goes from kindergarten through 12th grade. So this is Miss Bresley's class, working with Ms. Ramsey in their project Lead the Way Special at Riley Upper Elementary. This particular lesson was one on mechanical testing, where engineers take a look at how material acts in response to force or stress. So it was not just a paper chain activity. There was certainly a lot of meaning behind it, and we are seeing that exploration go across all of our classes from kindergarten through 6th grade. We have so many, as we've shared with you in the past, so many community partners who are hosting our students from Garfield Community School. You'll see many of them in action here at their job sites, whether it's in libraries or stores or doing grounds work here and then work here at central office. There are so many different sites across our community, and we are so grateful for our partners and for our staff and leadership in the Western Maine Skills Center program that have built such a robust set of opportunities for our students. Here we have some of our Cooper Elementary kiddos working hard and working together. Lots of opportunities for collaboration, not only in their classrooms, but in the new LMC and Idea Factory spaces. We see some kiddos here from Buchanan, also having a great start to the school year, whether it's story time at the carpet, in PE class, in art class or in Project Lead the Way. Here we have a group of students recently, I don't know if you've ever heard of Goose Chase. It's an app that allows for a scavenger hunt. So they were doing a scavenger hunt through the newly designed Career Technical Center. And so they had to demonstrate that they understand their classroom procedures, and they also got to take a look at many of the new spaces available to them at the Career Technical Center. Here we have Team Culinary Arts at Garfield Community School. This past week was Rice Cake Week, so they learned about making healthy treats, and of course the importance of wearing gloves whenever preparing food. Here we have our Cleveland Elementary students. Many of you remember these days when we first take picture walks through books, right? So we, of course, try to grow our readers, and one of the first ways we do that is to tell stories through pictures, and they're doing that with their partners. And are those the cutest little faces or what? We have all our little learners at Jackson Early Childhood Center. This was their Yellow Day Parade, and they were out in full force. Even the babies in their stroller. And so they had a wonderful Yellow Day Parade, and if you check some of their social media, they had lots of great photos of the kids. It has been open house season. I want to thank each and every one of our board members who have just been out and about in force as well. And most of all, we really want to thank all of our staff who welcomed students and parents and all of us to their open houses and curriculum nights. We have 2 more this week, so we have one at Cleveland and one at Rosedale. Those are our final 2 because they were both bond schools this past summer, and so they will be our final 2 on Wednesday night if you are able to make it. As you know, one of our main focus areas and one of our core 4 priorities is student achievement. So one of the ways that we are really focusing on that is in our PLTs, or our professional learning teams. So this was a kickoff of a number of our secondary schools in their PLTs, and these were the staff PLTs taking place at the middle school and high school earlier this month. So important for that time for collaboration. Here we have a lot of new smiling faces. We had an after-school professional development session recently for some of our newly hired elementary teachers. So thanks to our coaches in our academic services department for bringing our new teachers in and providing them an additional level of training as we begin the year. And more LCTC students checking out some of their new digs. This was the recently renovated large group room. So around the perimeter of the room are some of that stadium seating. And so when they're listening to presenters or having a large group, or they may have the CPR mannequins in the center of the room, they can be around the perimeter in some of those areas. As you know, one of the things that the board included in the budget this past year is support to help our student athletes and our parents by providing funding for uniforms on a rotating basis. So not every team every year, but it was one of the additions. And here we have our Churchill volleyball team. They were celebrating their new uniforms, and there is a tremendous amount of gratitude across the high schools for this support for our student athletes, and it has certainly alleviated some of the burden on parents for fundraising and things of that nature. So very well received. I'll highlight some of our fall athletics. We have the Franklin girls swim and boys soccer. Had some early wins early in the season. As you know, we love our marching bands. They make those Friday night lights just come alive. And so you see each of our marching bands here from the different high schools, and they always keep the energy high. That drum line just, I don't know, it just gets your heart stirring. We have our girls swim from Stevenson, had a really working hard this season, as is our boys football team. And we had Stevenson girls golf have some recent success, as well as our boys soccer teams. We had an opportunity, I think we shared with you in August, that Stevenson was the school this year who had a chance to start their season at the Big House. So they got to go to the University of Michigan Stadium, and you see them here, our football and cheer and pom and band, and what a great opportunity for them. Last year, Churchill started that, and if I am going in the correct order, I'm going to assume it's our Patriots next year. So a great opportunity for our kiddos. Churchill football has been just starting strong, had a big game on Friday night. It was a crosstown rivalry game, and versus Stevenson. We've got another one at Stevenson this week with Franklin coming their way. So we know how much work that is for all of our athletes and our coaches. Staff Appreciation Night is often celebrated by our volleyball team. So here you'll see some of the Churchill staff that were recognized by members of the volleyball team at Churchill, and you see them getting ready to play Fordson on the right. And cross country, this is their season. They work throughout the summer, really, really hardworking athletes. We're seeing lots of PRs across our 3 schools, and you'll see some of our Churchill athletes right here. And some great photos. Hometown Life is out there and taking some great shots. Are those not some great action shots? Just, I just want to say, everybody come down safely, right? When you see those kind of pictures. So we see our Franklin Patriots here. They had their first annual Patriot Invitational, and so all flights earned a win. So that was fantastic. We also had, this is the time as it starts to close in on the fall season, if you can believe we're getting there. We usually select a home game for each of the sports, and this was Our Lady Patriots celebrated senior night. So those are all the volleyball players, and it's a big night. If you've played in those sports for many, many years, and you're coming upon your last few games, that's always a biggie. And here you see some of our student sections at Franklin. They're called the Colony, and boy, they show up. They show up home, they show up away, and so just some great photos there of those Friday night games. We also, our student athletes represent our district at KLAA Leadership Days. So recently, Northville High School hosted athletes from across the region. And we see some of our students here from Churchill and from Franklin. I know we also had student from Stevenson there as well. Great chance to talk about leadership and the responsibility and privilege that comes with being a student athlete. So those days are really important. So lots of kudos to share. We had some amazing positive behavior champs at Cooper. So the Positive Behavior Intervention Support, that's PBIS. We had many students each week that earn rewards for their awesome behavior. So we have a great group here from Cooper. And as you know, we recently welcomed Beth Warwick, the young lady in the center there, to join our Student Services Department. And then on the next slide, we had Lauren Feigl was appointed as the new principal at Garfield Community School. So as the board knows, and we want to share with our community, we have those 2 leaders that will be starting with us very soon. We also had Nicole Collins, third from the left in this picture. She is the new business office assistant principal at Franklin. She has already jumped in and is doing great over there. And we had Mrs. Swearb, who won $5,000 for Cooper Upper Elementary from channel 955. I sound 100 right now, but I can't figure out what channel that is. But congratulations to her for being selected as a special teacher to receive this award. And always great to hear when our grads are moving on in the field where they've studied. And as you know, our work at LCTC is really to make sure that our students have the opportunity to head into the world of work if that's where they want to get started. And so you see Lillian Riney here from the Franklin High School class of 2023. She was a criminal justice student, and she has been recently hired as a cadet with the Wixom Police Department. So she's also attending Schoolcraft College. And when she earns her 40 credits, she'll be able to attend the police academy. So great knowing it's a strong criminal justice program at LCTC, lots of interest in it, and great to see them moving on and being selected for these really important positions in our community. This was a wonderful story. I'm sure you remember, several weeks back we had some horrible weather. We had some tornadoes in the Canton area and downriver, lots of flooding. And our kids were coming back from, I want to say, I think they were coming back from downriver, I'm pretty certain. But in any case, one of our amazing bus drivers, Cheryl Caskey, really took time to get our kids home safely. It was quite a trip coming through a pretty severe thunderstorm and some flooding. and to show their appreciation, the team, and that's athletic administrator Casey Conway, gave Cheryl the game ball from that evening's game. She not only got them back safely, she got them into the school and into a secure area, stayed with them as parents picked up, and of course, as we had our teams getting there as well. So it's a really tough job. It's a really tough job, and once again, great to see one of our drivers just continuing to go above and beyond. I think you've probably heard a lot about this. We recently got to see the Franklin High School Athletic Hall of Fame open up. So this was the inaugural class, a couple of state championship teams and a number of individual athletes. So wonderful job by Dusty Hall and the team at Franklin. You see former athletic director Ron Hammy there with some of the honorees. It was just a great night. You see members of our POM and cheer teams walking out each of the athletes that were honored. And really, Hometown Life did a very nice write-up on that as well. So congratulations to all of our recipients. I think they were thrilled to be back at Franklin and thrilled to be honored in this way. So sometimes, our teams have a chance to be out under the real big lights. And so Churchill POM had a chance to perform at Comerica. They did an amazing job, and what a great opportunity for them to shine. So we've seen our basketball team sometimes out at, the Pistons play at LCA, right? Yes. I mean, how we showed you earlier about our football team and band and cheer and POM out at the big house. So great to have these opportunities for our students, and we want to thank our community partners for hosting us. Stevenson's girls golf team recently won city champs, so we congratulate our Lady Spartans on that big victory. And Livonia Churchill girls golf won the KLAA East Division. So some great golfing going out there, and I think they still have a few weeks of good weather to enjoy. We love to see this. We have some models of integrity here from Grant Elementary. They talk about being a good friend and doing the right thing. Earns them the title of Models of Integrity, so we love to see that, and we love to see our schools highlighting that type of behavior. A few other cool happenings, and then I'll wrap it up. As you know, the Lego League is growing at the elementary level. It's really an offshoot from the robotics teams that we have across the district. So here you see Mrs. Rose and Mrs. Bashwadi from Kennedy. They've kicked off the Lego League there, and the kids are having an absolute blast. This is an after-school club or activity. We have our Peer Link at Frost. So we have some of our Peer Link classes where we have students in our general education program become classroom leaders in our Frost center-based program electives, and an amazing experience for all of the students involved. So love to see those smiles and those friendships blossoming. And as you know, we had a chance to show off LCTC, not only at the open house, but we had a sneak peek about a week and a half ago. And we were able to show the new robotics center as well as the common collaboration spaces used by both our LCTC students and our robotics teams. And Rory, yes, Rory was in town. He took a break from all of the victories at Ford Field and came over to Johnson Upper Elementary. It was really a great assembly. A number of our cabinet team were able to attend, and a strong message about leadership and the importance of being a leader in your own life. So we appreciated Rory coming out and representing that strong, positive message for our students. And I had a chance to go with Mrs. Keats and Mr. Abate. We had a great opportunity in Mr. Barker's A-Push class, and a great discussion about, is a hot dog a sandwich? We're not going to get into it here, but it was a deep discussion. They had to support their argument with facts, not only opinion. Great opportunity to show. We've really asked our leaders to ask their staff to please extend invitations to us when there are special things that they'd like us to see and participate in, and we're calling that our purposeful visit. So of course we can pop in and visit, and we certainly do that, but this is an opportunity for someone to say, this is a lesson we'd love you to see. And so members of our team have been out and about doing that, and I know the three of us just love that. Thank you, Mr. Barker, for hosting us. Some great news about our M-STEP results. We have seen some strong increases in proficiency across many of the areas tested on the M-STEP. Of the grades tested, we had 4 grades, 5, 6, 7, and 11, increased proficiency in ELA. We had 7 grades, increased proficiency in math. We had all 3 grades that take the social studies test. Social studies and science are taken only at 5th, 8th, and 11th. All 3 grades increased proficiency, and in science, they increased proficiency at 5th grade. That resulted in 15 out of the 20 areas tested, and 12 of the 14 in ELA and math, in the top 20 of the 88 districts in the Tri-County area. A number of them in the top 10 or 15. And so we're very proud of the continued growth of our students, the work of our staff, and we continue to have aspirations and work toward high levels of learning for all of our students. But certainly a tremendous work being done, and we look forward to that continued growth for our students. All of our grades and all of the subjects are above state averages, in some case well into the double digits above state averages. And I'm going to close here with some of the highlights from our recently renovated and reimagined library media centers. So the first few pictures are going to be Cleveland Elementary School.
Wow.
You'll be able to see it in person on Wednesday. This is the Flex Classroom with the nano wall that folds back accordion style and can open up completely to the LMC. This is the Idea Factory. We'll move on to Rosedale Elementary. They're just refilling the shelves again with all of the favorite books. The Idea Factory right off of the entrance to the LMC. The classroom area where the teacher will gather with the students. And in the mid-left, you can see the round pads, they're called lily pads, that students can take and sit on when they're working anywhere in the library on that carpeted area. This is the Rosedale Elementary Idea Factory. So we had students in there getting started with Mr. Tedesco in their STEM learning. This is Riley Upper Elementary. You know, it's a pretty large space and really one of just a spectacular renovation. We have some reading nooks here that our students have already figured out and are enjoying. Look from the other direction. Again, some of that stadium seating where the teacher can be teaching or reading and then the students are gathered there in those areas. This is Frost Middle School. Some great collaboration spaces, reading areas, research areas, and the ability to bring in small groups of students as well as entire classes. This is the Idea Factory at Frost Middle School, so all of our K4, 5, 6, and 7, 8 schools will have Idea Factories. Some booth seating. And finally, we have Franklin High School. So just wrapped that up recently and again filled the shelves. So there are high top areas, there are small group collaboration, areas with technology, of course books and materials for research as well. Very much set up like closer to a college campus type feel, but what a beautiful transformation at Franklin.
That is beautiful. The colors are wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And so as we close up, we have the Livonia Historical Society holding the Livonia Center Cemetery Walk on October 1st, so this weekend. The proceeds will benefit the LPS Education Foundation, and I believe tickets are still available, Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And Touch a Job, so you know Touch a Truck, so we have Touch a Job coming up this Saturday. I want to thank Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Gray and members of the LCTC staff who will be there with information about our Livonia Career Technical Center, and there are 3 different sites that students and their parents can visit to find out about many jobs, especially in the area of manufacturing. So it is really geared to students 12 and older. So that event will be taking place this weekend. And just give a shout out again for the foundation. Their annual luncheon will, their guest speaker is Carolyn Clifford, and that will be November 1st at 11:30 at St. Mary Cultural and Banquet Center. So if you'd like to go to the foundation's website for ticket information, it is available to the entire community. Fall portraits on the barn are back. Are the spaces filled, Mrs. Jenkins? They are, okay. But you can get on a wait list, right? And you may be called. That's always popular, so thank you to Mrs. O'Brien, Mrs. Jenkins, and I believe also Mrs. Thompson, right? Will be there. And then finally, just remember to stay connected. We have a new communication called the LPS Link. So Mrs. Jenkins and I are working to try to keep most of the key highlights in that email that will come out every other week. Certainly, we may send some other district emails, but this LPS link is really meant to highlight either some special programs or key information that we want our community to have. So thank you, President Johnson. I know that was a lot of information, but it's the start of the school year, and we've got some great things going out there thanks to our students, staff, and families.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist, for the comprehensive update. There's certainly a lot of good things going on in the district. Before I forgot to mention earlier that for those of you who are watching at home that want to follow along with our agenda, you can go to our website, which is livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and drop down to meeting information. You'll be able to follow along with our agendas. That will take us now to item 3B, written communications. I do not have any written communications. Are there any? Seeing none from the board. We'll go to C, response to prior audience communication. I do not have any. That'll take us then to item D, our audience communication. This is the period of time during the meetings when the board listens to community concerns through our blue slips. So anyone who wants to address the board, please get me a blue slip. I do have a number of them. As I indicated, this is the time for the board to listen. One thing to keep in mind is that the board has three primary roles within the district. One is that we set policy for the district. Another is that we hire and evaluate the superintendent. And the third is that we align our funding with the district priorities. If your issue coming before the board tonight involves any one of those three items, then if you're looking for a response, that response would come from the board. If you're looking for anything else, what we call our day-to-day operations of the district, and you're looking for a response, that would come from our administration. Also, keep in mind that our audience communication is limited to 15 minutes. I don't think we're going to take that long tonight. But if we do, the remainder would be after hearing from board members, which is the last item on our agenda. We will have, and I think
3 minutes.
3 minutes per person, yes. And Mrs. Bradford will have a timer. I have, I think, 4 blue slips. The first is from Stephen. Is it Grankel? Granke?
Yep.
Good evening. If you, can you check, just tap it and make sure there's a green light on?
Just, if not a push, just.
Yeah,
Just-
there you go.
There you go.
Okay.
Fifth.
Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
You're
All
ready.
right. So I'm just here to share a concern that I've not experienced but heard directly, and I'd like to address. There's certain parents that like to get involved, and sometimes they do just volunteering, and sometimes they take like a sub job and stuff. One thing that really concerned me is I've heard and actually directly witnessed at least some of this, is some of the parents, because they speak and share their concerns with the board, they're getting blackballed. Basically even told to the fact that they can't participate in like sub jobs or even volunteering because they brought some concerns to the board, and that's highly concerning to me. You know, if a parent's gonna take the time to get involved and they get blackballed because of it, it's just not cool. And I'd like to express that concern to the board. Do with what that information is you will. Other things I'd like to address, and particularly my kids go to E.G. Aero, and another thing I've heard recently is some of the students, one in particular had battery committed against him, and his group of students got in trouble, and the bullies are being protected. Now that's very concerning, especially when you have battery. And in fact, the same student has threatened the life of another student, and it was kind of like, shrugged and swept under the rug. And that student, I've just learned, is going to be leaving the district because of this. So, I mean, I think the administration, especially at Nijiro, is failing these students. And I know in previous discussions, this has already been addressed to the board, it's getting worse. So I hope you take the time to look into that and address that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Heather Collinash. Did I say that right? Good evening.
I am also a mother at Nijiro, and to piggyback off of what a fellow parent, Mr. Grinke, said, I've been attending meetings speaking on the bullying prevention policy since June, and I am shocked that I am still requesting a formal response to my questions proposed at the June school board meeting. Yes, I've met with Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Green, and Mrs. Oquist has sent me a letter, but none of these communications have addressed what my questions were. And now I have reviewed the Michigan state law concerning bullying prevention, and I do not believe that LPS is following the law. I'd like to know, in addition to the questions I've posed at the June and August meetings, where I can read the logs of what bullying prevention trainings have been attended, when and by whom for the district. Also, per the law, what is LPS choosing to report to the state, because the logs that the state has do not seem to correlate with what we've experienced. Clearly, this issue has my attention, and I intend to keep on until it's clear to me that our children, all of them, even the ones perpetuating bullying, I believe everyone needs education and support in order to reverse that cycle. But I intend to keep on until my questions are answered and I feel like I've seen the policy working effectively. And right now, especially based on what we've seen at our school and in the parents I've met with in other schools, it's not being addressed the way that the law states and per the policy that LPS has in effect. So I just intend to keep following up until I feel like we're at a place where children are adequately protected. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Bridget Casey. Good evening.
Good to go?
Good enough.
Okay. So I just wanted to address my response from Ms. Oquist as far as the busing for Nijiro goes. Thank you for responding, appreciate that. But I would also like to bring to your attention when I had mentioned that the families at Nijiro had paid for a bus to bus kids in from the other districts because we are a magnet school. That was to bring to the attention that the majority of the students at Nijiro now are from Livonia. And comparing it to Webster, another magnet school with both in-district and out-district students, they are allowed busing, but we are not. And I understand from your response that you said when Nijiro was first developed by the district, it was communicated clearly that as a school of choice option, busing would not be provided. You changed our schedule so that we would align with the other schools in the district so that what was said, at least said to us when all of this was coming about, that we would be provided the same resources as the other schools. So I feel that when you told us this in the beginning of Nijiro, which I was not there at that time, it doesn't, like, our school is different now. Our school, it doesn't apply to our school right now because you've changed a lot of the aspects of our school to bring us into the district, yet you're still kind of making us this special outside school. The other thing I would like to address is the way that our principal, Mr. DeLuca, is handling a lot of situations. I just want to give an example so you understand where I'm coming from. The other day, my son had mentioned that a water bottle was squeaky and the kid gave him the bird. So I got a phone call just to inform me that my son, another child gave my son the finger. And I was like, well, did he do anything wrong? No. Is he in trouble? No. but parents are not being notified when their kids are literally being assaulted at the school in the first 3 weeks of school. The students are talking about it, and then the parents are finding out after the fact. I do not understand why communication is so bad at the school. I see no reason why I should have been called about my son, another student, flipping my son off when my son did nothing wrong and nothing was, pertaining to it. But parents are not being notified when their kids are actually physically being hurt. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And hopefully it will end, and hopefully maybe someone can speak to our principal about it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Beach. Good evening.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm here today to ask what course of action parents and students have with regards to the bullying and fighting that is occurring at schools within the district. My daughter is currently at Emerson. On February 28th, 2022, my daughter was assaulted while at Cooper during her gym class. The girl came up, pulled my daughter down to the ground by her hair, and got on top of her and started hitting her. And many kids knew that this was going to happen, and nobody spoke up. The assistant principal called me to tell me that my daughter had been assaulted and wanted to know if I just wanted to wait until the end of the day. Did she go home on the bus or did I pick her up? And so, needless to say, I rushed up to school with my husband to pick her up. And let me tell you, nothing prepares you for seeing your child after they've been assaulted. So I was told that the reason this happened was because the other kids said that my daughter was annoying and was trying too hard to make friends. And she essentially blamed my daughter for trying too hard to make friends with people who weren't interested in her. When I asked to see the video of the fight so I could understand the interaction that took place leading up to the fight, I was told that there was a malfunction of the equipment and a call had been placed to central office to try and retrieve that. I never got to see the video, so I don't really understand the full interaction that occurred beforehand, but I wanted to view it for my own purposes to see if there's anything that we needed to work on at home. My request to the assistant principal and the principal went, unreturned. So unfortunately, some of this drama has still trickled over into Emerson. And these girls will take any opportunity they can to intimidate and threaten other students, including mine. And this has happened as recent as today. I have talked to our assistant principal, and we have documentation of things that have been sent to my daughter, so it's either happening in person or online. So I'm just curious to know, what happened to zero tolerance? I thought we had a zero tolerance policy for this type of behavior because it's unacceptable. And the dismissiveness of how severe and emotionally damaging this kind of behavior is alarming, and I'm quite disappointed in the district. I feel that LPS is not protecting our students, and we can do better. The bully is being protected, and the victim is being blamed. So what I'm asking for is your support. Please implement an anti-bullying policy that works. Create a task force that allows us to come together and find a program that will help our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next and last is Tim Furlong. Good evening.
Hi, I'm a new employee, bus driver for Livonia, and it's
Thank you.
it's an honor and privilege to be here in this district. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. There's one thing that's dear to my heart is safety, and those red lights when they're on the bus, how people just go right through them every single day, including today when I was on my run. I think it's more people just on the phone or lack of knowledge, awareness. I don't think people do it on purpose. RISA, where we get our license, our 2-year commitment, I'm sure you all know about RISA. Archie Denard he's from the city of Detroit originally. He's been a superintendent. They put a beautiful video together for the city of Detroit about bus safety. And I thought that'd be a great idea for somebody that could do here in Livonia, in the school district, and some kids learning how to do video or editing or something of that nature. So I thought that'd be a great idea that we could do that here. We could have it roll in the office here or at the schools or send it out to the parents. But just do a live video shoot with, our bus, Livonia Public Schools, and pick a bus driver and kids getting on and off a little bit, something really short and sweet, like a minute or two, just about the awareness of the red lights. 90% of the times when I have my flashers on, people are stopping for those. The yellows, those are when you're supposed to slow down and stop. The reds, people go through them. And I think it's just lack of knowledge, I really do. So the kids, number one reason they get hurt or injured is getting on or off the bus. And the red lights are being run when they're getting on and off the bus. And it's just sad. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. I remember when I was in Stevenson years ago where a student was killed, Nancy Berger, right in front of Stevenson. And it was devastating for the community. So safety is real important. So if there's just a way we can do some kind of awareness for red lights in our community, especially with Livonia and the construction on Wayne Road and Newburgh Road, every day there's accidents. And people aren't happy driving a lot of times, and they always want to try to beat the school bus, like I did years ago, but I don't do it anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I do not have any other blue slips. Are there any others? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, our consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Burton.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of August 21st, 2023. 5B, minutes of the special meeting of September 11th, 2023. 5C, minutes of the special meeting of September 18th, 2023. 6A, purchase of bulk salt.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. All right, no questions, no comments. We're going to go right to the vote. Mrs. Bonifield?
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, the motion carries. Thank you. That takes us now down to item 6B, HVAC equipment for 2024 projects, 2021 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Acosta.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Real Point, to purchase HVAC equipment from Thermalnetics, Auburn Hills, Michigan, in the amount of $449,300 for summer 2024 projects.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Frank. And we'll turn to Mr. Francis.
Good evening, President Johnson. This is something that we had discussed at last week's Committee of the Whole meeting. This is rooftop units for large spaces such as LMCs and cafeteria type areas. This isn't having to do with individual office or classroom spaces with those vertical unit ventilators that we've been putting through the past couple of summers. This is a planned purchase, and we are bringing this forward now. And I know we had this conversation, got a little bit confusing for, for a bit there. So we'll run through it kind of high level real quick again to say, we know that we're going to be bringing the full summer 2024 package soon. We'll be putting that out to bid, and the aim is to bring that, I believe, in November for the board's approval. We're pulling this forward, and we need the board's approval of the $449,300 in order to send a purchase order to the manufacturer. The manufacturer will not start producing an item. We're doing this to get that calendar, that clock ticking, and this is a long lead item, these units. So that is why we're bringing this early, to get the clock started on the manufacturing process. The manufacturer themselves will require a purchase order. We can say to them, hey, we'll sign something, we'll tell you we really are gonna promise to come buy these things, but they say, no, we need a PO. And then what we'll do is, when we do have the full bid pack, whoever bids on that electrical packet will have that in there, and we'll transfer that amount into that contract. So legal counsel for the district has reviewed this, has approved of this as appropriate way to be able to pull forward an item for, again, our desire to not run late on the supply chain side.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. I know we did have considerable discussion on this item at the Committee of the Whole. Are there any questions or comments? Everybody understand what's going on? Okay. We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Frank, to approve the HVAC equipment for 2024 projects, 2021 bond. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, the motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 6C, outfall repairs at Stevenson High School. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve TSP Services, Inc., Redford, Michigan, for the outfall repair work at Stevenson High School in the amount of $202,800, which includes contingency.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Bradford, and once again, I'll reach out to Mr. Francis.
Thank you again. This is a planned project that is for a repair to that area. That's at Stevenson High School, between the building and the tennis courts, and just to the east in the wooded area. We do have that creek that's in there. That is where the water sheds into. So when it rains, when we have storms, et cetera, it sheds there. So for many years, there's been erosion occurring. When you get into that area, you have to walk into the woods to see it. We did have a review by Arch Environmental. They work with the district on multiple environmental items, and they found that it was in poor repair, and we are recommending that we go with this sinking fund project. So before we have further damage, our concern is not only having it shed properly, but also not breaking a pipe. We still haven't completely collapsed the area, so we do want to get in there and have this repair. It's an important repair for us, just for the basically to continue to A, shed the water properly into that creek, and B, we don't want to get to the point where it actually collapses, because it'll just cost us more. So this is on our property in that area over there, so we are responsible for it. TSP has been vetted. It is the first time we would be using them, but they've been vetted. They've worked and had praise from the municipalities and parks that they have worked with directly. And the $202,800 has about a 10% contingency added into that from the original amount that we talked about at the Committee of the Whole. Their bid amount was $184,359.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
Just wanted to bring up, in case anybody from the public was listening to this meeting that didn't catch the last meeting, this, although it gets close to the Frankavilla neighborhood, it does not impact any neighbor's private property. This is completely contained on our own Livonia Public Schools property.
Correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Other questions or comments? I wanted to thank you for the photographs and the diagrams. They were very helpful in determining exactly where this area was.
You're welcome.
So we appreciate that. All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to approve the outfall repairs at Stevenson High School And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Benefield says yes. Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes, and that motion carries. Thank you. That'll take us now to item 7, our instructional matters, and item A is approval of creative curriculum materials. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Frank?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of Creative Curriculum Cloud from Teaching Strategies for $39,900, which includes curriculum for infants, toddlers, and 2-year-olds.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, and we will hear from Mrs. O'Brien. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Johnson. This purchase is a renewal and an increase in the number of licenses that we have had. So we purchased this for our Jackson Center preschool program in 2021. And so for the past 2 years, some of our teachers have been sharing licenses. And so this not only is a renewal of licenses, but an increase in the number of licenses. So this curriculum will provide all the teachers an opportunity to work together and create a curriculum pathway through our daycare, through our preschool programs. And then next year, when our early childhood center programs merge together with GSRP at our new center, GSRP has been using creative curriculum for many years, so all the teachers will be utilizing the same curriculum resources. So we are asking for $39,900 for all the teachers at Jackson Center to have access to the Creative Curriculum Cloud.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Burton?
Mrs. O'Brien, you mentioned that the GSRP is already using that. Now, is that paid, that's paid for our GSRP teachers out of a separate budget?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the purchase of creative curriculum materials. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us now to item 8, our personnel matters, and item A is teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Bradford?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment for the 2023-24 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Frank. And we're going to hear from Mr. Abate. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Johnson. Hello, everybody. So the staff members we are presenting to the board this evening are part of a late summer, early fall hiring effort intended to fill a wide range of needs across LPS. They are all well qualified to fill these positions. They've been fully vetted through our extensive interview process. We're confident they'll perform at a high level and represent Livonia Public Schools in a manner that is consistent with our shared vision and collective commitments. These positions have also been included in our 2023-2024 budget. We're pleased to be recommending these talented professionals to join our LPS family, and with your approval, we're very excited to have them working with our students.
Thank you, Mr. Abate. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Frank, to approve the teachers on the list. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you.
Congratulations to all.
Congratulations to all of them.
Congratulations.
That takes us now to item 8B, teachers for tenure. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Jarvis?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and acknowledge that tenure status has been granted to the following teachers effective on the respective date. Claire Campagna Fraley, September 27th, 2023. Tara Forrester, September 28th, 2023. Jennifer Javer,
September 16th, 2023. Jane Johnston, September 4th, 2023. Jeffrey Skibo, August 30th, 2023. Douglas Putnam, September 14th, 2023. Laura Rosen, September 7th, 2023. Yashinori Yonayama, August 20th, 2023.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. And Mrs. Keats?
Yes, that's
Good
me.
evening.
Good evening, President Johnson. Our teachers for tenure on this agenda have successfully completed the district's requirements for probationary teachers, including years of service, evaluations, overall performance, and documentation of student growth. We have carefully reviewed all supporting materials along with the recommendations of our building administration and have verified they should be granted tenure status with Livonia Public Schools. We wish to offer our congratulations for reaching this milestone and look forward to their continued success with LPS.
Thank you, Mrs. Keats.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments from the board?
Could we mention that Mr. Skibo is in the audience here and wish
We
him
can.
congratulations?
Congratulations. See what happens when you come to a meeting? You get recognized. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield, to approve the teachers for tenure. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
President Johnson.
Yes, the motion carries. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That takes us to item 8C, leaves of absence. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Acosta.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and approve the request for a leave of absence as listed below. Hannah Landon, effective 2023-24 school year. Jacqueline Walker, effective October 27th, 2023, the 2023-24 school year.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Bradford and Mr. Abate.
Yes, thank you. So the staff members listed in your documentation are requesting leaves, and they are in accordance with their collective bargaining agreements. So we ask that you please approve them as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Abate. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to approve the leaves of absence. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 8D, resignations. This is for board information and does not require a motion. So we'll move on to item 8E, retirements. And may I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Burton.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for services rendered
The board please adopt their attached resolutions of appreciation.
Thank you, Mrs. Keats. Questions, comments from the board? Obviously, congratulations. We wish you well in the next chapter. We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the resolutions of retirement. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton.
yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. That now takes us to item 9, hearing from board members. And item A is the first reading of board policies under fiscal management. And we have 3 board policies tonight. for first reading. They are Board Policy DIA, Account System, DIB, Financial Reports and Statements, and DJCA, Payday Schedules. And I want to thank Mrs. Smith for all the work that she has put in on these policies, and I will let you take it from there.
Thank you very much. The first policy is the account systems, as you mentioned, and we're making an update to the first sentence of that board policy. So the new policy would read, or I should say updated policy would read, the Michigan School Accounting Manual Bulletin 1022 shall serve as a mandatory guide to the uniform classification and recording of all accounting transactions for the school district. A complete record of all expenditures shall be maintained in these accounts so that a periodic examination by the Board of Education or its representatives can easily identify any receipts or expenditures. So not a change in the intent, but just an update to the language in that board policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions, comments? Mrs. Burton?
Just for the benefit of those who may be listening from home, the gist of the changes that the first sentence had said it's going to be in accordance with state of Michigan. This specifically states which manual, which bulletin it's going to be in accordance with. And as we spoke about at the last meeting, this has not changed for a very long time. So we're safe putting that into policy that that's going to be the case for a good long time going forward.
Correct. And they do regularly provide updates to the manual, but the manual itself, the 1022 manual, has been around for years and years and years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Everybody comfortable with this language? All right, so we'll put it on for a second reading at the October regular meeting.
Perfect. I'll take you to the next one. Our next policy is policy DIB, financial reports and statements. This is rather short, so I could read what the board policy was and then what we're proposing to change it to. The board policy read, the Board of Education shall receive a listing of expenditures and wire transfers at regular board meetings. The board may require additional financial reports. So we're just expanding on that and kind of, to describe better what we are doing. So this policy would be updated to read that the Board of Education shall receive financial reports at a public meeting of the board on a quarterly basis. Additionally, each year, an outside audit firm will present to the Board of Education a report of the audit completed on the prior fiscal year. The district's accounts payable check register for the most recent school fiscal year will be available on the district's website, and the board may request additional financial reports. So the quarterly updates is what we've been doing for, well, at least the last 5 or 6 years. And we've created a new administrative procedure, which we discussed last week at the Committee of the Whole meeting, to detail out what would be covered in those quarterly meetings. And what the board policy said about the expenditures and wire transfers being presented at the regular board meetings, instead of bringing them to the board meetings, those are posted on the transparency page of our website. So if anybody wanted to look at who we are paying, they could go to our homepage, and up in the upper right-hand corner, there's an icon for the transparency page. You click on that, and you can find our check register as well as a number of other items. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions? Mrs. Bonnefield.
Mrs. Smith, does this meet and/or exceed our state requirements for transparency and our being able to provide that documentation and information to the public?
It does, yes. And those intents, again, of those regular, some districts might not even amend the budget once, so don't have discussions necessarily publicly with the board about the state of the finances, but having these regular quarterly updates make sure that the board and our community is aware of the financial position that we're in, if there's been any changes since we've last discussed it publicly, so there'll be no surprises.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. In the past, when we operated under the previous wording here, we did receive a very thick listing of expenditures and transfers and so on, but there was no discussion. We read it, we didn't know what it meant. And you have since made it so that you present to us the budget, the changes in the budget, the implications of those changes, what they mean, and how we can best move forward. The changes that you have implemented have made our work easier to understand. The element of transparency is there, it's available for the public, and it's presented at a public meeting. I think that everything you have done has so exceeded the previous method that I'm really happy to see it codified like this. And I appreciate the work that you put into that.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Any other questions? Mrs. Burton?
I likewise really like the system that we have right now. I do respectfully disagree that the old method was worse. It was when we were operating under a different set of guidelines. We didn't have the transparency page where our check register was posted, so therefore we had to have it in a physical copy. It wasn't necessarily a worse system, it was just a different system that we operated under. We did have lengthy discussion with your predecessor, Lisa Abbey, but I do like the system that we're in right now, but I just want to make it clear that we did have a workable system. It was just a less electronic and therefore a little bit more paper cumbersome, and we had to go through some different processes to get to that end to make certain that everything was accessible. When folks wanted to have access to that, from the public even, they could get it, but they had to ask for it. This is a better system that we're on right now because it's electronic and it's on the transparency page. But I just do want to make it clear that we could understand our system before. It was just a different system. And this one, I believe, is easier because it's electronic. And a lot of that, it's just, technology gets better and better. And it's nice having the transparency page, not only for Livonia Public Schools, but that's a requirement of the state of Michigan. So any school district you go to, on the very front of their page, their website, they're required to have a pop-up of a transparency page logo that pops up that you can click on, and you can get the same information for any school district in the state. So it's an improvement over time. But I just want to make it clear that we were not lacking information. We were just on a different system.
It's
Thank you,
nice
Ms.
with that update, again, posting things on our transparency page, it just gets information out to the community even faster. Whereas we had to wait for a regular board meeting to include those in packets that, of course, get posted on our website. Now, shortly after the end of the month, we run those reports so that we can update them and get updated reports out on the website.
And we did kill a lot of trees, printing check registers that we do not need to do now. This is definitely a better system.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. How are we on the language? Everybody good with the language, so we can put this on for second reading? Board meeting. Okay, last
one, perfect. Policy DJCA, payday schedules. So we had discussion on this both at the study session and then again last week at the committee meeting. So we took the feedback from the committee meeting and have incorporated a sentence so that this board policy reads, for payday schedules, see the individual master agreements on the district's website, and then we list the different union groups, which are AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We crossed out LCEA, which is Livonia Community Education Association, because that group has dissolved. Of course, those employees are still here, but not under that collective bargaining agreement. And then we've got LEA, the Livonia Educational Association, LEADS, Livonia Educational Administrators, LPA, Livonia Paraprofessionals Association, LSA, Livonia Secretarial Association, and SEALS, Supervisory Employees Association. And I will mention, because we were just speaking of the transparency page, all of these collective bargaining agreements are listed on our transparency page, so anybody that would want to see what the payday schedule is for a particular group has access to that on our transparency page.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions or comments? Okay, everybody good with this language?
Yes.
All right, so it'll be second reading at next month's regular meeting. And again, Mrs. Smith, thank you. I know we spent a good deal of time at both the study session working out some language. You went back for the committee of the whole, made some adjustments, suggestions, and we worked that language out. So again, thank you. There's a lot of work that goes into these, so we appreciate it. All right, that takes us now to item 9B, voting delegates, 2023 MASB Delegate Assembly. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Frank.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve Tammy Bonifield, Karen Bradford, Colleen Burton, and Mark Johnson as voting delegates, and Madeline Acosta, Crystal Frank, and Liz Jarvis as alternates for the MASB Delegate Assembly in Lansing, Michigan on November 9th, 2023.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Acosta. This is all in relation to the fall conference of the Michigan Association of School Boards. They do have their delegate assembly, which will be Thursday evening. It's always the Thursday evening of their convention. It is the period of time where all the school districts have their voting delegates. They deal with bylaws like we did tonight, other items that come before their board, and we need to have 4 delegates and then 3 alternates. And I thank you to my board colleagues for stepping up and agreeing to be the delegates for that conference. Beyond that, are there any other questions as it relates to the conference? That's going to be, I think, November 9th through the 12th, if I remember correctly, in Lansing. All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Acosta, to approve the voting delegates for the 2023 MASB Delegate Assembly. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, and that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 9C, hearing from board members, and as has become customary, I will open the floor to anyone who wants to speak this evening. Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our LPS secondary band staff that have put together the first annual marching band showcase this evening that's taking place unfortunately tonight while we're here, but at Stevenson High School, and hoping that it's been a terrific event.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Other questions, comments? Mrs. Burton.
As we mentioned earlier in the meeting, but needs more than a mention, this is Jill Wozniak's last meeting with us. Jill has been in the position of secretary to the superintendent and the Board of Education for many, many years. And you make your work and your diligence makes our jobs so much smoother, so much easier, and look far more seamless than they actually are. On top of doing a superb job in that role, you go above and beyond. All of us have kidded around, but we're absolutely serious that we have called you many times on the way to an event saying, can you remind me the name of this person, or can you remind me the time of that event, or am I going to the right building or not? You have worked tirelessly for many, many years behind the scenes, making sure that all of the work of this group goes so much more smoothly than it ever could. On top of that, you have become a dear friend to all of us. I was privileged to be your friend before you and I both wound up sitting at this table, way back when Marshall was our elementary school for our kiddos. But we are going to miss you dearly. Teresa, we're excited to work with you and to get to know you on a much more personal basis as we all do become friends together, working as closely as we do, and we welcome you to the team. We're excited to get to know you. And Jill, I'm glad that you're just going to live a few blocks away still.
Only a phone call away.
Yeah.
You've made it easy, all of you. It's been a pleasure.
You can.
President Johnson, may I make just a couple of brief comments?
Okay.
I will be brief. So I know we had a chance to share a number of thoughts a couple of weeks ago when we brought Mrs. Wozniak's resolution forward. And we shared at that time what a special individual she is. She works tirelessly, and She leaves no stone unturned to make sure that she is responding to the needs of our students, of our families, of our staff, and each of us. I know on behalf of our cabinet team, we not only are so grateful to Jill, we truly enjoy every single day that we spend with her. We enjoy one another, and she makes the office a place people feel comfortable and welcome and want to be. She answers, she's that voice on the other end of the line where, some folks are pretty upset when we're talking about their children, we're talking about, the people that mean most in the world to us. And she just has a way of empathizing sincerely with families and with staff who are in need, and really helping them to be in a better place until the next person can get to them. She is a gift to us in so many ways and will be so tremendously missed.
Thank you.
And I notice her husband is with us tonight. Thank you, Dwayne, for sharing her. For those who...
Good luck, Dwayne.
Boy, split personality. She's not like that here.
Very nice to them.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And anything else from the board tonight?
And welcome to Teresa.
Yes.
Welcome, Teresa.
Yes.
We look forward to getting to work with you.
Is there any other business be brought before the board tonight? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you.